You have, of course, been listening to the President of the United States delivering his State of the Union, leaning heavily into an economic message front and center at the top. But I think probably the thing a lot of people will pay the most attention to is how raucous the Republicans were. You had Marjorie Taylor Greene yelling, "You're a liar," lots of, especially over his comments about Social Security and Medicare. There's a big uproar. They were yelling at him about the border and other things. Kyle, let me go to you. First of all, what were your sort of big takeaways, big impressions?
Well, I like the fact that most of the speech was economic and the early part was economic. I feel like that, you know, if you lean into that, that's positive and that'll get a good reaction, I think. But obviously, yeah, the bigger story is how, I'll go with the word annoying, how annoying the room was. And I'm very curious to throw it to you guys. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting old. I don't know if it's because I'm tired and it's past my bedtime. But every single time somebody chirped up, I was like, shut up. Just wrap it up. I don't want to hear it. It's annoying. He's speaking. He's the president. Even if he wasn't the president, if he was Bob from the PTA meeting, it's like, let Bob finish his thought. Because they're all just trying to get a viral moment. They're all just trying to fundraise off it because of the Joe Wilson moment back when Obama was president and he screamed, "You lie," and they had massive fundraising numbers. It's like, I get it, I get it, I get it. You're all virtue signaling. You're all trying to get, you know, the spotlight on you. But it's dumb and it's annoying. Do you guys agree with me?
I'm not so sure. Here's the thing. In terms of my objective feelings about, or in terms of my personal feelings about it, I'm indifferent. If anything, I actually do kind of enjoy it just because I like the idea of a raucous House of Representatives. That said, look, if it's all fake and it's all a stage, then these people are going to have to play their part, right? You pointed to that. Marjorie knows exactly what she's doing. She's absolutely going to raise a lot of money. But I would even step back. I don't think that was the biggest story that's going to come out of that. It might be a 24-hour thing, and some people will be like, oh, my God, my norms. Guys, the biggest story, the takeaway, is whenever he was confronting them directly on Medicare and Social Security. I mean, in terms of in terms of what we will be talking about probably for weeks now, that moment is gonna get replayed over and over again when he's like, okay, are we all agreed here? Oh, so you agree with me, so it's not gonna be a problem. Stand up if you agree with me. That was actually, look, I'll give the man credit. That was the best absolute part of the speech. It was the only part where he went off script and it did actually work for him.
Yeah.
There were a couple where what did he say? Name a man who would trade places with Xi Jinping. I still do not know exactly what that means. All right, so like my meta takeaway, I was telling you guys this during the speech, vast majority of people stopped watching the State of the Union after about 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
The first 30 to 45 minutes was all an economic message. Most of it was made in America. I mean, look, not even President Obama ever gave a made in America speech like that. And to me, that just shows me the way that Donald Trump really changed politics forever on made in America and on China. So those two issues, it's solidly in this State of the Union. No president even almost disagrees now at that point. So for the Medicare and the Social Security, and then I thought overall it was an effective speech as far as Biden ones goes. If I were him, you know, I'd be pretty happy with my performance.
Marshall, I want to get your thoughts. I sort of feel like with the Republican interruptions, et cetera, Biden really led with this message of like bipartisanship and unity. He made a long show at the beginning of saying, congratulations to Kevin McCarthy. Congratulations to Mitch McConnell. We're going to work together. We did work together in the past. So he wanted this message of like, I'm the guy who's here to work with anybody. We've gotten some things done together, et cetera. And so it certainly serves Marjorie Taylor Greene's and whoever else's interest to get their little viral moments for their Republican-based fundraising. But I also do feel like that sort of plays into Biden's hands as well when he's trying to portray himself as the grown-up in the room and the one that's serious about actually reaching out and getting things done.
Yeah, it's what we were talking about at the start of the real live show here, which is that voters like hearing that. You know, like you could obviously, I think it's important to separate the like annoying DC version of like, oh, back in the 80s, everything was super chill and everyone was best friends, the Gipper and Tip O'Neill, like that, the Joe Scarborough thing. But like at a baseline level, the centerpiece of American politics right now is what like suburban moderate voters think, and they want to hear that. Marjorie Taylor Greene's district may be interested in her doing that performance, but no one else is. And that's a real misjudgment that could be effective in 2024.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, let's step back. What did we say at the top? Or at least for what I said the balance is economy, lead yourself, try to gaslight a little bit about, oh, everything's great, you know, all of that. At the same time, you're like, I'm a bulwark against. So what did he lead with? He goes, here's all the things I've done. Goes straight into the bulwark against Medicare, Social Security. I will veto. And what does he end on? He ends exactly on stop the steal. Now, look, saying the Paul Pelosi attack had anything to do with, quote, the big lie and not schizophrenia is ridiculous. However, politically savvy move, I think, to try and tie.
Pay attention to what people say. So
right, yeah. So it's like one of those where, listen, you know, you tie those two things together, and you know, it's savvy, I think, in that regard. You end on the democracy thing that really kept people there. So look, I think he hit all the notes. It clocked in at around an hour, 15 minutes. As State of the Unions go, that's pretty average. I mean, overall, again, I just come back to, I'm like, effective job. I really think so.
So, one of the things I jotted down a bunch of the stuff that I thought was most interesting. One of my favorite lines was he was talking about the 15% minimum tax rate for corporations worth over $1 billion, and he says they have to pay a minimum of 15%, and then he said, like, kind of casually and flippantly, God love them.
Yeah,
and that got a decent laugh, and you know, I was chuckling here. I thought that was a good line. I noticed early on, one of the very first lines was like, we've created 12 million jobs, and then everybody starts clapping, and Kevin McCarthy's sitting there like, yeah, I will not clap at 12 million new jobs. It's like, dude, this is one of the ones that it's like, you have to do it just to look like you're sane. And then, like you were pointing out, the Social Security and Medicare moment there, what I was getting really annoyed by is like, just own it. It is a lot of the Republicans' position that they want to cut it. They might soften the language to try to blunt the effect by saying, no, we're just trying to reform it or save it. But functionally, they want to cut it. And when he says that's what they want to do, and they're like, boo, 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 it strikes me as so disingenuous. Like, just say, yes, this is our position, and we would like to debate that on the merits, and we would like to defend the position of cutting Social Security. They get so weaselly about it, and that's what was driving me crazy. I was screaming about it here in the studio when we were watching it.
So the thing that he's referring to specifically when he talks about, like, sunsetting these provisions was what Senator Rick Scott, who was in charge of the Republican senatorial campaigns this time around, so not like an insignificant player, it was part of the plan that he put out. And this was, Mitch McConnell was basically like, shut the F up. We don't want to talk about that. We're trying to run on nothing here and just like bash them on inflation. So this is not without basis. And you've had other Republicans also talking about the debt ceiling, talking about cuts to entitlements. You have had some others who say, no, we don't want to do that. Donald Trump obviously said, like, this is off the table. But what's sort of more interesting to me is I feel like in previous eras, in the Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan era, they were much more comfortable owning the fact that they really wanted to cut Social Security and Medicare. Like, if Obama had said that at a State of the Union, they would have been like, yes, we do, and here's our plan, and here's Paul Ryan with the PowerPoint of how he's going to do it. And so, I mean, this is another way that even though you still have a lot of the same ideology, even though many of them still are committed to it, would like to cut Social Security and Medicare, et cetera, the fact that they're offended that this is suggested about them, that they want to cut these programs, represents a pretty remarkable shift in terms of the Republican Party and what they want to publicly put forward.
What do you think of that, Marshall?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, Krystal. I mean, the core thing, as you guys are articulating, this really reminds me of the defund the police debate in terms of like how you could identify a vulnerable area. So think of defund back in 2020. There were some Democrats who were very defund. There were plenty of moderate Democrats who weren't vulnerable. You can take the more extreme position as the party's trying to figure it out, and that's as an attack point. And that's basically what's happening with Social Security. Back in the 2000s, like think of when George W. Bush tried to reform /cut/privatize Social Security after he won re-election in 2005. Like back then, the party consensus was that this is what we do. We fight against the New Deal. We're fighting against the Great Society. That's our party. After the Social Security privatization failed, after Paul Ryan flopped as a VP, and then after Trump then ran in favor of Social Security and in favor of Medicare, also we need to add the failure of the repeal of Obamacare, Republicans genuinely don't know what to think. And I think as you see, and the thing that's funny, Kyle, I get your point about needing to have a fair debate, and I agree with you most of the time, but like J.D. Vance, for example, J.D. Vance like actually wouldn't be in favor of cutting Social Security.
He came out into what you said.
I don't think he's the vast majority. I don't think he's the majority of the party, but especially with younger Republicans who are basically grown up in an America that's accepted the New Deal, that's accepted Social Security. It's actually not quite clear what the actual position is, which is why it's perfect for Joe Biden to attack in that direction.
I completely agree with that characterization. The defund is exactly right, which is one of those, they're like, no, what we want to do is raise the retirement age. And it's like, well, okay, well, you're still, when you're already within that heuristic, it's like, it's not going to be good for you. Just so people know, cutting Social Security and Medicare is probably up there with defund the police and affirmative action as the least popular things that you could actually try and do in politics, hence why he beats him over the head with the club with it, which is exactly what I would do. I was surprised that he didn't mention abortion more in the speech. My count was a single line. It came, let's say, like 2/3 or so into that. I was pretty shocked by that, actually. That's something I would have led with if I was President Biden.
So I just want to say, look, I hope I'm wrong, but we just saw with this whole fight with getting Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker, there was a whole fight, and it was a right flank that was pushing back against him. And one of the things they settled on is we're going to have a debt ceiling showdown. And our whole position in the debt ceiling showdown is we want to force cuts to Social Security and Medicare. So I think the overwhelming majority of the party is going to be on board with that. Now, whether or not, I hope Biden is telling the truth when he's like, I'm not going to do some sort of grand bargain. I'm not going to cut it at all. But I think the predominant position in the Republican Party is let's cut it.
Well, I'm not so sure, because remember, that's only 17 people, right, who tried to extract that. Those are like the Tea Party, Freedom Caucus diehards. Look, the majority, I genuinely have no idea. I do not know. If you were to ask me my gut feeling, I think most of them would say what I said, something around like they want to raise the retirement age. But of course, we don't.
But that's cutting. That's the cutting. Yeah.
I agree with you. What I'm saying is like that is what I think most of them.
They don't want their position to be characterized as cutting Social Security and Medicare.
Because they're disingenuous.
And
they're trying to save
different.
It. Like, that's the line they're going to go with.
Right. But that is, even just them not wanting their position to be characterized that way is very different.
Oh,
and of course, the fact that, Joe Biden was part of the Obama administration that actually put a deal on the table that would have cut Social Security. And now and he, over the course of his career, a number of times talked about cutting Social Security. So it does show you the way that the politics around this issue have clearly shifted. Now, one thing I think that's really important to say is that in terms of the big money institutions within the Republican Party, like the think tanks and, the Coke industry, the Coke network, they still are very much looking for every opportunity they can possibly find to cut these programs, and that matters a lot.
I think they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to piss on people and say it's raining. So they want to do the debt ceiling thing, force the cuts, and then go, we're not cutting, we're just reforming it, we're saving it. So that's their game. That's what their game has been for a long time. So I think that's the goal. It's not like they're actually becoming more moderate on it because they're afraid to acknowledge what their actual position is.
They recognize how toxic and terrible the politics are for them. They recognize that they cannot be out and out being like, yes, we want to cut Social Security, because they have realized that is devastating for them. I want to pick up, Saagar, on what you were saying, because that was something I noted too. In advance, you were saying okay, here's the formula. Yes, economics, but clearly the Stop the Steal stuff and January 6th and abortion, that's what won the midterm. So he's going to lean into that. He really didn't. He closed with democracy. Yep. He closed with January 6th. Paul Pelosi with abortion was also in the latter part of the speech, but the part that really counts in terms of what they're, focused on and what the message they want to take away, it really was loaded up with economics. And I was also surprised that you had very little mention of abortion ultimately in this speech. The two themes that he leaned into very heavily to start with was this idea of I'm the guy who can work with anyone, bipartisanship, let's get things done for the American people, and then laying out the case of what he thinks he's delivered and what he still wants to do. Now, one challenge for him is the fact that we were looking at a poll before the speech. Very few people say they feel like they've been impacted by the Biden agenda. So, whereas I think if you're overselling the economy and the rosy picture of the economy, you're going to have a hard time. There probably is some benefit you can get just from selling, here's the things we did, and going down the list and trying to persuade people that, no, actually, we have been doing some stuff. What do you think, Marshall?
Yeah, I think it's, I just want to go back to a quick thing you said about the lack of focus on the abortion, the democracy thing. Like maybe I think this kind of goes to my early comment about how I'd be curious about Joe Biden's like political analysis here. And it seems to me the political analysis is that you need to move on from 2022. Like you're going to reach those heights, you're going to be successful that midterm, but maybe that's just not going to be successful running on that retread when it comes to 2023. Like there could be an instinct of like, man, we're going to still like you're still talking about that. Like it's not up for grabs as much. So yeah, I'm really curious how the right responds to the economic stuff, especially Saagar, to your point about how Biden and Team Biden are clearly taking the like made in America, compete with China bit that Trump added. So that, especially given the, I think, attempt to bring things back to culture wars is going to be an interesting shift there.
Yeah, I already know what they're going to do. They're going to go culture war, they're going to criticize him on the border, and they're just not going to talk about econ because that's how it goes. Anyway, Kyle, let's get our last thoughts from you before we bring in Ryan and Emily.
Sure, yeah, so I wanted to point out the fentanyl line from Biden. So he's over there talking about fentanyl, and you have Marjorie Taylor Greene and others that start screaming at him. And I heard somebody say China.
Yes.
And then somebody say, like, it's your fault or something like that?
To be fair, the vast majority of the fentanyl comes from China. So that's
okay, I know, I understand that. But I always get super triggered over this because I feel like the approach from many people is just brain dead. Because Krystal and I have talked about this. About 30,000 people a year died from overdoses when it was the pain pills. Then we cracked down on the pain pills with all the good intentions in the world, and then people went to the black market and they got heroin. Some of that heroin was laced with fentanyl, and now we have about 100,000 people dying every year. So it's this like the tyranny of good intentions in a sense, because if I were to tell somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like, hey man, we need to legalize, tax, and regulate drugs in order to get past this whole fentanyl crisis, she'd be like, you're insane. That would add to the problem.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fair point. I think it's also a fair point to say, like, there is a lot of fentanyl coming across the border. And from what I've seen, they've said that actually, if you did at least have some more enforcement that was happening there, it would make it much harder and raise the price, which would increase actually the amount of pure heroin. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing. What I'm saying is it's complicated. I also would remind you, we have to talk about what's in the realm of the possible. And in that, what was it, in the polling data that we had there, which one is that if we have that element? Is that A3? Can we go ahead and put that up there on the screen? Pew Research, I think cracking down on illegal drugs was at like 57%. So, I mean, the public is just not there whenever it comes to
no, I understand that,
like legalizing drugs. Yeah, there it is. Reducing the availability of illegal drugs is right there at 53%.
Biden also doesn't get credit though when Biden gets a lot of shots from his left on the border because he's continued a lot of the Trump policies on the border. So he does a lot of the things Trump has done, and it's not like anybody on the right goes, hey, we agree with you on this one, fella.
Well,
they
you're
just
talking
act like
about
he's not doing it. They act like he's in favor of open borders or something.
Well, you're talking about migrants, and to be fair, his administration has tried to end a majority of those policies in court, and it's only after they weren't able to end those administration policies in court that they ended up keeping them. So
actually,
I think that's
they not only kept them, they expanded them.
Well, then they expanded them. After they tried to kill it in the court, then they decided.
And also, there has been a lot of fentanyl seizures at the border. There's been a number of them.
There's been some. I mean,
the idea that he's like not trying to see. My point is, look, we can keep going round and round in circles trying to do the same policy that's not working, or we can do the actual solution. But she's not interested in a real solution. She's interested in yelling at Biden in the middle of a speech when he's talking about a very serious issue like fentanyl.
I don't think
he needs to get serious on it, and she needs to get serious on it too.
I don't think anyone on this stream has claimed Marjorie is interested in a real solution.
And neither is Biden. Neither is Biden.
It's
just like
she's
also,
there.
We perhaps can close this out with a something that will unify us in the spirit of what Joe Biden wanted to bring, which is both Kyrsten Sinema and Marjorie Taylor Greene apparently dressed like it was the Hunger Games.
Yes. What is going on?
Kyrsten Sinema wearing some yellow Big Bird ass looking thing. People have all kinds of memes, and Marjorie Taylor Greene in some white fur.
Yeah, she looks like from Lion the Witch in the fucking wardrobe. I mean, look, I'm gonna break my cursing thing. This is driving me insane. What the fuck is going on? Like, Kyrsten Sinema literally is dressing like she's going to the goddamn Met Gala after presiding over the Senate in a t-shirt with a heart on it. She is solely responsible for breaking a lot of the female dress code that is there. And I blame her for Marjorie looking like she's literally in Hunger Games or Lion the Witch in the... I am losing my goddamn mind over here over the collapse of dress code. Go ahead, Marshall. What'd you say?
If we're gonna rank, I think we have to say George Santos' Orange Tie isn't great.
Yes.
I think Marjorie. Let me put it this way. I think Marjorie is more compelling than Kirsten Sinema is.
Yes.
Let me put it this way. Like, if Marjorie showed up in yoga pants and a t-shirt and you met her at a coffee shop, she would still like have like a lot of like main character energy to her. I clearly think Kirsten Sinema is someone who accessorizes to make up for the fact that she's just like bleh. So
boring.
Very. I think that's
substantive
insightful.
commentary.
Insightful commentary.
Okay, everybody stick with us. Just give us 5 minutes. We're going to switch the chairs out. We're going to have Ryan and Emily in here. Thank you all so much for your support. Control room, let's throw the graphic up there and we'll start
Marshall
the
and
transition
Kyle,
process.
thanks, guys.
Marshall, Kyle, you guys did a
guys.
fantastic job.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
listening.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.